From the cat whisperer to the CEO whisperer, our next guest has been called the human Cliff Notes. Now, behind the scenes, he's the man who quietly helps executives stay current on important cultural events around the globe.
He also makes his services available to the masses with a unique publication called the ZEITGUIDE. With us today is Grossman and Partners founder Brad Grossman. Welcome to Orion 360. How are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good to see you. So Fast Company called you the human Cliff Notes. What are you helping these people study for, my friend? It's not Beowulf.
Well, sometimes they'll ask me about that, too.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. It's basically they want to stay on top of the leading edge issues that are changing the world and therefore how they're going to affect their businesses.
Right.
Well, now, you keep them up to date on all the things in culture, what's hot, what's new, from food to movies to everything. And why is that helpful to them?
Well, it's not just that. It's, you know, how do we break through in this world where we're completely inundated with content? How do we find great employees? What is the future of retail? What's the future of media? You know, what's really happening in our world in terms of business and finance? What are new types of leadership? How are we being disrupted? How are we becoming more globalized? And what's really happening in the world, which we really have to be on top of, so that we can.
You're like a cultural news curator, and you provide bespoke news for these executives.
Great. Yeah.
Oh, you like that? It's okay.
Yeah. With context, though.
With context.
Okay.
So help them understand the meaning behind it.
Okay.
So what's in the day in the life of your job like then? What do you do, and how do you go about distributing the information to them?
Well, first of all, I have a whole team of researchers.
Okay.
That
So
helps.
they're basically finding, curating, looking at every single piece of news and information that they need to be on top of. So I have one researcher who's focusing just on startups and the change in the content and media industries. I have one, we call them junior ZEITGUIDEs, who's keeping on top of world events, as well as organizations that are helping to make the world a better place. I have another ZEITGUIDE who's just looking at all the mergers and acquisitions, IPOs. So I have a dedicated researcher who's focusing on that one vertical. So me, personally, because I used to be a one-person show, or shop, really, I wake up and I read 5 newspapers, I look at all my newsletters, I look at all the tweets, so I get in my head a narrative of what's happening that day and how does it fit in the continual narrative of the world.
How do you sift through all of that information and determine what's worthy of passing along to the people that you work with and what's not?
Very good question. Well, first of all, I've been doing this for 20 years. I used to work in the entertainment business just doing this for one person. And before
Who was that one person?
That one person was Brian Grazer.
Yeah, it's a big deal. Yes.
He called me his cultural attaché. My job, which was for 5 years that I was doing it, was to find, filter, and focus on all the things that people need to know. And it was used to help the company, him and Ron, to stay culturally relevant and creatively prolific.
So when did you realize that you could do this for more than one big-time Hollywood executive? How did you know that this could be its own business?
Well, from that job, that job I was actually, my mandate was to bring an interesting person from all different verticals. So I would bring in Nobel laureates based on Brian's curiosity. I would bring in authors. I would bring in Pulitzer Prize winners. I would bring in newscasters. I would bring in politicians, etc. So I created a big database and community of experts who are thinking about different issues. And then I realized that Brian has this amazing curiosity. For him to be the best that he possibly can be, he needs to know about everything. He needs to be informed about everything and have it distilled to him in a particular way. So I'm like, okay, there must be other people who want the same service. And then the world changed, which was to my benefit. You know, the economy crashed. Digital startups have been disrupting every industry. And we're inundated with content and we're inundated with ideas. And I just know that not only leaders of industries, but their entire corporation or their entire organization needs to know what they need to know because they have to spend their entire day doing their real jobs.
And they simply don't have time to sift through it all by themselves.
No one has time.
No
We don't even have time.
That's why you have a team.
That's why I have a team, exactly.
Well, do you have a barometer or any examples of how you've seen this affect the CEOs and help them perform better?
It's not just about them performing better. You know, we do help them see what's coming into effect. Like, for example, one of our clients didn't really know that Nest was going to be bought by Google for $3.3 billion. We told them about Nest years ago. We did a ZEITGUIDE just on the subject of big data, like 3 years ago, right before people were talking about it. So we have this sense because we're reading everything, and my brother Scott Grossman is my business partner, and he runs the operations and systematizes the business, and he has this notion, I wish I had the slide, of find, filter, focus. So
find, filter, focus.
Yeah, find, filter, focus.
Okay.
So
Our
team is finding everything about a particular subject that we feel our client needs to know about. So they're reading white papers, they're reading newsletters, they're reading blogs, they're reading tweets, they're watching TV, they're watching Charlie Rose, which I still think is an amazing show to help you understand the world.
It's still a Rise 360, but you know.
Top of the list, So that's the finding, and then they basically figure out, okay, this is really interesting, this is really interesting, we're finding patterns. And then they filter it through, and then because I have these relationships with experts all over the world and in every single vertical or profession, we call them ZEITGUIDE fellows. I'll call them up and say, what do you really think about programmatic bidding? I don't know if you know that, but that's really about the automation of the advertising business, how to sell advertising automatically on digital platforms.
Wow.
So
I love that.
So we'll have clients who come to us with a really complex question that people have been talking about, but they don't really know exactly what it is and exactly what it means because, as you said, there is not enough time in the day to be experts in everything.
And sometimes, frankly, it's just too amorphous. There are all this language, all this jargon, and it's all a little too heady. And you help boil it down to its essence and make it
There's a
digestible.
lot of buzzwords these days. Big data. What does that really mean? I mean, it's like data. There's always been data, right? There's just more of it.
There's more of it.
But now you get all this information from people, but you said before that you won't help people cheat or fake it before a dinner party. So have you actually turned down clients that want to do that? They go to an art gallery exhibit, they want to fake it, like, oh yes, this is by the artist such and such. And
well, that's a very good question. I mean, our basic reason for working with a client is because they want to make sure their business is on the top, remains on the top of the world, and if not, they can improve themselves. So, if they come to me and they're like, okay, I'm going to an art show this weekend and, I want to know more about it, that's not the questions, we're like, go Google it. We're talking about really big questions that are making seismic shifts in our culture. So, like I said, it's about, obviously people talk about the difference between Gen Xers and baby boomers and this new generation millennials, right? They don't really, millennials have this horrible reputation for not staying as long in your company, so therefore why should I spend our time and money training them to work in our company when they're just going to quit in a year, right? So
that's their reputation.
Right.
That's their reputation, but not all of them are like that, but it is a problem in corporations. So what we try to do is to teach them, and we call this startupification of corporate America.
Startupification.
Right? Startupification.
Okay.
So how can they turn their companies to become more like a startup and not the old school corporate environment so that they could get great talent, and how do we change our leadership to help them be a part of our community and feel good about it? So, that's one part of obviously digital disruption and social. Everybody wants to understand how to do that. And then I would teach you guys, what are the ways for you guys to break through in this climate of an intense amount of content? How do you break through? How do you reach your consumer? And how do you distinguish yourself from anything else?
So how do we break through? How do we reach our consumer? And how do we distinguish ourselves? Tell us right now, please.
Well, I would have to do an intake and find out what keeps you up at night. What do you want your show to be? And how would we compare your show to anything else that has been in our culture, and how have they succeeded?
Okay.
So maybe we'll have to let you do that evaluation, and we'll put it on Twitter, and you tell us what we need to do.
Yeah,
we'll
there you
publicize it there. Do a little test.
So what's next for you?
What's next for me?
Yes.
I want to keep building my company and keep working with really smart people and helping companies and organizations all around the world succeed and solve problems.
Now, what should we be on the lookout for?
Well, let me ask you a question.
Yes, go ahead.
What keeps you up at night? What do you need to know?
Keeps me up at night, the success of this show.
Yes.
I want it to be huge.
Okay,
Yeah.
so what are other examples of shows that have been huge. Who do you want to be?
That's a good question.
Okay.
I mean, a cross between Charlie Rose and Michael and Kelly. Can we do it?
Absolutely.
All right.
You got to find really deep on the digital space and just through walking into any type of environment and, you know, finding out what people want. You have to figure out what people want, and if you can reflect that in your show, I think you're really going to connect with the audience. You got to know what people want.
Okay, well, we want your ZEITGUIDE. Tell us where we can get it.
You can get it at ZEITGUIDE.com. By purchasing it, you get the hardcover book, right? And basically, we read 370 articles that we link to in the ZEITGUIDE. So obviously, this is a book, but we also have the digital version at ZEITGUIDE.com that you can purchase, as well as a linkable PDF. So our job is not only to give you the insights of what we feel like the future is going to be, but it's basically fine filtering and focusing 370 links and telling you exactly what you need to know.
Oh, okay.
Hashtag
Going to get
find,
that.
filter, focus.
There you go. Thank you, Scott.
And thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're
Thanks for
watching
having me.
Arise Entertainment 360.
Oh.